So the question that was asked is, could Kundalini kill someone? Okay, so the answer to this one is yes, it could do. Now, so just to put this into perspective, I would say that when people begin to experience Kundalini moving through their body, most people do not experience things that are painful or uncomfortable. For most people, it's simply an energetic transformation and it occurs. They may be aware of it, they may not be aware of it, and it's part of their journey and not something that's painful or uncomfortable. Now, some people do experience things that are painful or uncomfortable. And I would say out of those people, you could say that they fall into three camps. The first camp are people who need to reduce the amount of spiritual practices that they're doing. And they need to start doing some grounding practices every day. And when they do that, they reduce their practices, they start grounding, then they feel fine. They might need to continue at that lower level of practice for a while. They might need to continue doing the grounding practices every day for some time, but eventually they'll be able to increase their practices again. So that's the first camp, that's the first group of people out of all those that experience problems. Then a second group of people who experience much more severe problems, maybe intense pain in their head or intense heat in their body, something like that, and they really need to stop all their spiritual practices for some time and just focus on grounding. And with those people, generally they might need to stop all practices for a while, for a few weeks or a few months. They might need to engage in quite intense grounding for a while, again a few weeks or a few months, but eventually they become stable and they can increase their practices again. Now there is a third group of people, and I would say for these people, they find it very hard to reduce practices. They might be able to stop their meditation practice, they might be able to stop any pranayama practices, but they have an intense longing for God. They pray to God all the time, and they can't stop thinking of the divine. And that doesn't work. If you stop all your practices, but you're constantly praying or you're constantly thinking of the divine, those are still spiritual practices. That's still going to cause the energy of Kundalini to rage through the body, and even if they're doing grounding practices as well, that might not override the prayer and the continuous remembrance of God. So for those people, things can simply continue to intensify. And when things continue to intensify, they can enter a kind of downhill spiral. Thoughts start to change. People often refer to things called intrusive thoughts, which are thoughts that they feel are not theirs, but they're coming from outside. Emotions can get out of hand and become uncontrollable. And if people die in this condition, they usually die through suicide. Everything becomes too much, too unbearable, too intense, and they commit suicide. So that's how Kundalini could kill someone. It's extremely rare, but it's worth knowing what happens if we don't reduce our practices or stop our practices altogether, if things are getting out of hand. I don't actually know anyone personally who's ended up killing themselves because of Kundalini, but I have been told by others that they have heard of people who have ended up in that situation. And I can certainly imagine it happening because of the intensity of the energies involved. And so the key takeaway is, if you need to self-pace, and you need to self-pace down to 0, then that has to mean 0. That means not praying to God, not thinking of the divine, not yearning after a place where you will be free of all suffering, not watching spiritual videos, not reading spiritual books, not listening to spiritual podcasts, not visiting spiritual places, not going to church or the mosque or the synagogue. Okay, it has to mean nothing. Yeah. Okay, so this is for people who end up in a very severe situation with regard to Kundalini. And it then means just living your life doing perfectly mundane things. Yeah, bake bread, play tennis, take your dog for a walk, go swimming, read a book, but not a spiritual book. Yeah. Watch movies, but nothing too emotional or spiritual. Just really rubbish movies. And just live your life, spend time with friends, spend time with family. So everybody can bring themselves to a stable place and go for long walks, work in the garden, clean the house, do things that are grounding. So everybody can bring themselves to a stable place. No one has to think of God all the time. No one has to remember the divine in every moment. And there'll be time for that later. Yeah, there'll be time for that later. When you're stable, when you've reached that place of stability.